Hello, welcome to Just Lunch. We're really glad you could be here. We're Just Love, and we are here to inspire and equip students in Durham to pursue the call to biblical social justice. In a minute, you're going to hear a talk from my mum, and she's really cool. And before that, you're going to hear Sam with a Bible thought. But first, just to mention, current series we're doing is Stories of Hope, and it's just here to encourage you during coronavirus and show you how we can still be pursuing social justice even through isolation. And also, one more thing, notices, and next month we're doing June for Justice to raise awareness and money for International Justice Mission. So we're really excited for that and would love for you to get involved. And finally, don't forget, prayer is on Friday at 9 o'clock, and we'd love to see you there. Cool. On to you, Sam.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. This lunch, our Bible thought is looking at Moses in Exodus. And I'd love if we could spend a few minutes looking at the way that God first gets Moses' attention. So if you have a Bible, it'd be great to turn to Exodus 3, looking at verses 1 to 3. It says, "Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why this bush does not burn up." I wonder if you've ever seen anything that seems impossible, that makes you think, how is that still going? I've been thinking a lot this week about the persecuted church, about the suffering church, and how these people are brothers and sisters in the midst of incredible suffering and incredible injustice, somehow find this peace. They somehow keep going, even though by any worldly sense or logic, they'd have given up long ago. They'd be dead and buried, and yet we see them persisting and standing strong. And I came across this quote by a guy called John Newton. He says, "Some Christians are called to endure a disproportionate amount of suffering. Such Christians are a spectacle of grace to the church, like flaming bushes unconsumed, and cause us to ask, like Moses, why is this bush not burned up? The strength and stability of these believers can only be explained by the miracle of God's sustaining grace. The God who sustains Christians in unceasing pain is the same God with the same grace who sustains me in my smaller sufferings. We marvel at God's persevering grace and grow in our confidence in him as he governs our lives." And in Exodus, we see a people suffering, a people that are under a cruel regime. And I love that even before Moses comes on the scene, we see these people who are being sustained by God's grace. In chapter 1, verse 12, it says, "The more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites." And I've been thinking about, what does it look like for us to be a people that are completely sustained by God's grace in this season? I love the last line of that quote, which says, "We marvel at God's persevering grace and grow in our confidence in him as he governs our lives." And I love that the more we let God govern our lives, the more of his sustaining grace that we see. That as we come to the ends of ourselves, we begin to see his grace abound. But I also love in that quote that means our lives need to be governed by him. And in order for that to be possible, we have to trust him with everything. We have to lay everything at the altar and be obedient to what he's put in front of us. I love how in Exodus we see Moses, who goes from having almost zero confidence in God and his plans and purposes, even offering for someone else to go instead after God's laid out this huge plan. He goes from being this person of little confidence to being a man who offers to stand in the gap between God and the Israelites in Exodus 32. But it has to start with obedience. It has to start with a yes, a call to go. like Moses, that might mean coming kicking and screaming, but it means taking that first step, even if we have our reservations. And so the challenge for us is to be a people that trust every part of ourselves to Jesus today. There's such an opportunity, I think, for us in this season to be like burning bushes to the people around us, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our communities, for them to start asking questions like, how do you hold such a peace in such a time of anxiety? How do you have such a confidence when we've lost all this control? There's an opportunity for us to be like burning bushes in this season. And maybe, just maybe, like Moses, people will walk towards this strange sight and they'll encounter the living God. God bless.
Hi there, I'm Sonia Stojanovic. I'm Eva's mum, and it is a real honour to be able to spend a bit of time talking about my life to a group of faith-filled and motivated young people. So thank you for having me. I'm supposed to be talking about maybe how I got to Serbia and the whole idea of hope and how that has affected my life, and maybe then share something about how we're bringing hope today to people in need in this country. So it was the early 90s, and I was watching the news, and it was the time when the former Yugoslavia was falling to pieces. I don't know if you are aware of a little bit younger than me, so maybe you don't know that much about it, but it was falling apart, and there was a siege in Sarajevo in Bosnia Herzegovina, and as I watched, I just fell in love with it, and there was nothing that I could do. It was like it was more than just a human love. It was clearly something that God had given me, and all I wanted to do was to go and live in this place called Yugoslavia. And I told everybody I'm going to go and live there, and they were, oh, Sonia, of course you are. But I knew that was my mission, the thing that I just wanted more than anything else in the world. And so that was about 1992, and then everything I did from that point onwards was with the idea that I would go to the former Yugoslavia, whatever that entailed. And on the way, I couldn't understand why the Serbs were always the bad guys, because war was war, and everybody was behaving in a similar way. And the love just kept on growing, and I couldn't get rid of it. And sometimes the most challenging thing we face is when we have vision for something, and yet that vision hasn't been fulfilled yet. And for a number of years, I was in a sort of waiting game, really, and just waiting for the time when God was going to send me to this place that I loved so much and I hadn't even been to. And I think we should use that time to let God refine our vision. Probably a lot of you have vision for something. Maybe it's a place, maybe it's a task that that God's given you. But even when the challenges come, even when you get pulled to pulled in other directions, stay true to the vision that God's given you and be faithful, because He who's called us is faithful, and let that time refine us. And so for me, 1996 came. It was Easter time, and a good friend of mine said, I'm going to go to Belgrade. Do you want to come with me? And I was like, oh, can a fish swim? Is the Pope a Catholic? Of course I want to go. I was really busy teaching, and my friend said, oh, don't worry, I'll just organise it all. And she did everything. And the one question I had, we were so green, we had no clue. There was no Google to ask. You had to ask real people. And I said, do we need visas? And she said, oh, I'll check with the travel agency. So she did. And they said, no, you don't need a visa for Belgrade. So we're like, okay. So the day came. You can just imagine, I'd been waiting for this, 4 years. I was so excited. I thought I was going to burst. This is God's taking me to this country, and this is what I want. And we got on our first flight. They let us on, I don't know why. Second flight, we got to Belgrade, and we got to passport control, and this big Serb guy, he said, "You must go back," and I thought he was joking. He didn't look like he was joking, but it sort of turned out that we should have had visas and that we'd had no idea. And he said, yeah, our country had imposed that on them, and that we had to go back on the plane that we'd arrived on. So we'd gone on, like, by the way, this is one of my most embarrassing moments, honestly. I don't share this very often, but it is something that was so disappointing for me. We went on 4 planes in a day, and though it was comical, when I got back home and the reality sank in that I was nearly in the place where God had taken me, that I knew that was the place where I was going to see God use my life, and yet I hadn't even got there, really. And every time someone mentioned Serbia, I just cried. And the verse in Proverbs 13, hope deferred makes the heart sick, just became very real to me. That promise, and yet the thing that I was hoping for the most wasn't happening. And but at times of challenge like that, we do have to hold on to the hope that God has given us for the thing that He's wanting us to do for Him. He's great, and His promises are true, and His plans will be fulfilled. And I'm sure you've had experience of that in your own lives, and you know it to be true. And so we hold on to the hope that God in His goodness has given us. And so I was a train wreck after that, really. I couldn't do anything normal. Every time someone said Serbia, I started weeping. And my pastor said to some people who were coming regularly to Yugoslavia, to Serbia at the time, please just take her with you. And so my moment came, and it was the 1st of October 1996, and I had one of those awful calendars that it was full of Bible verses, but they always picked the oddest verses, but as it was the 1st of October, I was all packed, but I hadn't thrown my calendar away. The day came, I tore off the sheet, and the verse, the calendar had actually been made for me, and the verse was, hope deferred makes the heart sick. But actually the second half of that I'd never really, he hadn't even noticed it. It was, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And when we walk into the truth of God's promises, when we haven't let things distract us, and we haven't lost our focus, and we walk straight into God's promises, that longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And it's incomparable, isn't it, to know that you're at the center of God's will. And I came to Serbia, and honestly, it was like I'd come home. And a lot of things have happened since then. Clearly, I've got children. We planted a church. I met my husband here. We planted a church. We've seen a lot of exciting opportunities around the region, sort of unfold for us. But really, this is a country where there are so few Christians. We're in the south of Serbia, where the Turkish influence is very, very strong, and Orthodoxy is the main religion. So although it's technically Christian, it's very superstitious and very based on sort of tradition, and your sort of national identity comes from the fact that you're a Serb. And so there are, I don't know what the percentage is at the moment, it's 0.0% evangelical Christians in this part of the world. So it's really one of the most unevangelized countries in Europe. But we've been so blessed with so many opportunities to bring hope, and I think we should never underestimate the power of the small things. We can do big things, and maybe I'll share a couple of those in a minute, but the small things, the everyday things that bring hope to people, because when there are so few Christians to let you know that there is hope, when the economic situation works against you, when the hope of finding a good job is very small, when the pressures of political challenge come, and all the other things that go with this amazing country. It's not easy for people, and maybe just to share a couple of things about this corona strange time that we're living in. So for our church, we've been able to help with food for people. A lot of people live very much hand to mouth here, especially the Roma community. But so we've had there's really good things happening in the Roma community in Serbia, and we have good friends in a church that's in another town near here, and it's a Roma church. They're amazing, godly people, but they have a lot of mouths to feed in their church, and people in the Roma community, they do live very much hand to mouth, and with the crisis going on, they're not going outside to sort of eke out a living on what they can. So the good things that you have social capital. So when somebody hasn't got the basic needs, they'll borrow from somebody else, and so on. But when those supplies run out for everybody, the worries come about where food's going to come from, how they're going to provide, how people are going to provide for their families. And we've had this amazing opportunity to help friends out with. So the church has got 270 families in the church, and we've been able to, through friends in England that have helped us, to buy a sack of flour for each of the 270 families in the church, and like 25 kilos of flour. I wouldn't even know what to do with that much flour, but it's going to help people through to be able to feed their families until all this is over and they can get on with life again. And we're able to. It hasn't happened yet, but we're working on doing that for some other Roma churches as well. And when you live so close to the breadline, and brothers and sisters in Christ come and help you, this is how we build hope in people, and this is how we build those strong relationships that are going to go with us, and the church is going to bless the nation, and other churches in other nations are having the same or similar opportunities. And the church is here for a time like this, and just to encourage you to bring hope in the small things. If you get a chance to do the big things, that's amazing, but a lot of small things together make big things too. So I think that's really what I want to share to you, that you have your personal hope. You have your personal hope in Jesus and the life that he's given you and the task that he set before you. But also, you are the hope of the world, and you can bring hope to those around you. So one day I hope to meet some of you, and bless you. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Hello, I'm back with another challenge. So this week we've just heard a really cool story of hope through kind of great trust and obedience. And so I thought it would be cool if we themed our challenge around trust and obedience for this week. And so the first thing I'd like you to do is write down some things that you want to ask God for trust for in your life. So something maybe that you're hopeful for change or progression, and perhaps you're praying about it or you're doing something about it but it doesn't really feel like it's going anywhere. I want you to write down those things and to really give them over to God and to trust in the hope that he brings, and to trust him that things are going the right way even if it doesn't feel like it to you. And then I want you to either paint over these, or like maybe paint a picture over the piece of paper, or put it in some water or burn it or something, or just like put it in an envelope and then put it away in a drawer or something, to symbolise giving over these worries and these things that perhaps you've been relying too much on your own strength for, and perhaps it's time to give them over to God and allow him to provide the hope rather than taking it all on yourself. Maybe if you put them in an envelope in a drawer or something, you can come back to it in like a few months or a year or something and see whether God did show hope in those situations. yeah, the idea is trust in him to have strength in those situations. It's not all on you. And then I thought another fun thing we could do is you just try some like trust exercises with your family or whatever, a bit of a lockdown activity. You know, like maybe the one where you like fall backwards into someone else's catching you, or you, I don't know, like blindfold someone and then lead them on a like course around your house or something. But yeah, if you fancy doing any of them, have a crack, and you can always post them on the Just Lunch like Facebook page if you want, or just keep them to yourselves. Enjoy.
You promise you'll catch me?
I'll do my best.
Hi guys, hope you're doing well. I just want to share some updates about prayer as a Just Love community. At such a time as this, we really want to press deeper into prayer, and even though it feels like a lot of things have been cancelled, we want to tell you guys that prayer isn't. And we're going to be joining together as a community at 9 AM on a Friday on Zoom, and we're really excited for this as an opportunity to press deeper into God, and for this to be a real space of encounter. We really begin to share God's heart, and a place where God begins to break our hearts. So what breaks this?